Hey everyone, welcome to Middle Fantasy. I am your host as always, Zack, and I am super duper excited because we have a really fun interview for today. Today we have Nick Martell, who wrote one of my favorite books of this year, The Kingdom of Liars, and I have so many questions to ask you, but why don't you tell everyone who doesn't know of you, who you are and the books that you write?
So I'm Nick Martell. I wrote The King of Liars, The Two-Faced Queen, and the forthcoming Voyage of the Forgotten, which will be the third book in the series. And I write about magic that costs memories, weird, terrible kind of human beings, and a lot of other weird stuff, shattered moons, and it's it's kind of an overview of what I write.
Yeah, and see that's the cool thing about the book is it has something for everyone, especially when it comes to your first book that really caught me was actually I did see your Brandon Sanderson
But
interview, but I actually bought the book earlier because of your gorgeous cover. Because I'm a person that's like
yeah,
I hate to say it, but I do judge books by its cover. I'm like, dang, that's a sexy cover, and I just picked it up and bought it when I could. I'm like, yeah, this was a fun book.
Yeah. Look, anyone who doesn't say they don't judge books by the cover is lying. I think every single person kind of does. Like instinctually, they're like, "Ooh, that's a nice cover. Maybe I'll pick that one up first and
There's
just give it a
one
read."
cover that I'll always remember because it was so bad. It was a steampunk novel, which was I found it at Barnes and Noble, and the guy
Mhm.
had two Nerf guns that were painted bronze,
Oh,
and I was just looking at it dumbfounded for a good 5 minutes. Like, I want to read this, but I'm not sure.
yeah. I've seen some bad covers. It's fun. I think it's worse when there's really good books inside the bad covers because it feels like the book got off to a bad start where it's like I didn't even do anything wrong. This book is amazing. Just the
Oh
cover
yeah,
is kind of holding it back a little bit.
the one that I think of is for the Name of the Wind. There's like a Fabio cover where it's like it looks like a romance now. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
I have that one. It's on my
oh,
shelf.
oh,
I
I
love
love
it.
that one. I every
I,
time that I look for, I always look for a copy of that one. Like, I might just buy it because it's just every time it's like a conversation starter.
I adore that cover. Like I got it actually after I read The Name of the Wind. But I love it. It's like one of my favorite books is the Fabio cover. Is it like when you look at it, you're like, this does not say anything about the
It's
books
almost like the
except
exact opposite of what the book's trying to go for, which makes it even funnier.
I love it. It's perfect. I wish they had kept that one. That should be still be the cover.
Yeah. Now, like actually speaking of your cover, to go on this, what was it your experience the first time you actually got to see your first cover for your book? Did you have like the Back to the Future moment, like, oh, it's here, it's here, it's here, and you open it
Yeah.
up, wow.
It was really cool. Like obviously, like the first thing when I saw the cover is you see the shattered moon, and it was one of those things that was like, that's really cool. And like my editor made sure we had gotten the right amount of pieces in. And when we were designing the cover, they were really conscious of like, okay, what kind of architecture style do you see the city in? So I described what it looked like. So it was really cool when all those kind of elements came together. There's actually something really cool. There's like a secret hidden version of the cover that only
Ooh.
me and a few other people have seen that actually had a bunch of the characters on it. But we didn't. Those characters got cut for various reasons. But it was really cool. Like I got to see a bunch of characters on the cover and the moon in the city. It was beautiful. I love it.
See, I love stuff like that. Now, one of the questions that I had going back on it, because we're gonna get derailed a little bit, but
Yeah.
why did you decide to become a fantasy author compared to writing other genres?
I think fantasy is just like I like many people, it's their first love, right?
Yeah.
I love everything about it. Like the things you can do in fantasy is really incredible. Like you'll have stories that are like, say, The Name of the Wind, for example, which is kind of like a more like traditional medieval set story with all these complicated magics in them. Something like, let's say, like N.K. Jemisin's like Broken Earth series, which is just bonkers from start to finish. And
Yeah.
like, I yeah, it's brilliant. So like you can do so many things in fantasy, and then even if you like include like manga, video games, comic books, like your possibilities get open more and more. So I think I was always drawn to fantasy just because it was what I was reading and what I was loving. I love to explore.
Was there like a series or like a novel or something like in the fantasy realm that just hooked you? Like when you first read, like, yeah, this is awesome. I gotta go down this rabbit hole even further.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I think I've talked about it before, but like Del Toro Quest was
I
one of
I
my
I
favorite books as a kid.
You know what? I've read all of the Torah Quest. It's such a crazy book. All those covers were super crazy. And there's no way to describe it unless you were in that weird period of time. Because I
Hmm.
was late '90s, early 2000s, where I was getting books in the thrift store, so all the teenagers were dumping out their Del Toro Quest or their Goosebumps books, and I just remember just looking at those covers and being like, "What the truck am I looking at?"
Exactly. And like, look, those covers were just as crazy. Where it's like, I remember the one where it's like the giant bugs on it. I forget which one it was, but there's one that had giant bugs on it. And remember looking at it the first time and being like, is this book okay? Like, are they gonna be fighting giant bugs? Like, and then like some of them had dragons, some of them had like a traditional knight. Those books were perfect. Like
The one that I
covers, brilliant.
remember the most thinking about it is there's one's like a red manticore, but it was like
Yeah.
CGI, and it looked like the Rock from The Mummy Returns, and I'm all for that.
Exactly. Look, that was the style back then. Like nowadays, the style's a little different, but those books are perfect. Like those covers, like people say, like may not like them compared to nowadays, but I think they're perfect. Maybe I
And
just have nostalgia, but like I love them.
honestly, that's like the warm fuzzies, and especially when it comes to your book, which is interesting because one thing I wanted to kind of bring up was that your main release was during COVID-19, at least the beginning of it. How
Yeah.
was that compared to, a traditional release is a little different. I had a friend that also released during COVID-19. It's been an interesting process, and I think we're in an interesting period of time now where, people kind of have to do this switch. How has that experience been for you and releasing your books that way?
It was a mess, to put it nicely. And which is it's a weird position because I don't think anyone who released during a certain period has any positive things to say about their release, even though publishers, everyone were doing their best. It was just so much stuff was going on. One of the things I use an example is like my book came out in two different versions. Like it came out May 23rd in digital and audio. We delayed it to June 23rd, I also think, for the physical release. Certain Barnes and Nobles didn't get my a physical book in stock until 6 weeks later.
Wait,
All
really? I did
because,
not know that. That's crazy.
yeah, the one actually down the road from me didn't get it till 6 weeks later. So and they were just like, look, and I remember I was talking to a few of them about it, and they were just like, we can't get it in. Like, it's not even like we have it ordered. It's going to be here soon, but we don't know when, just because of complications with like getting them out there. It was a weird period where so many books had come out during COVID lockdown and those kind of things when various stores weren't open. So when they started like opening up, they were getting overloaded with books, and their systems couldn't keep up. So it was a very weird process that way. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg with what stuff we dealt with COVID. Like marketing changed, every aspect it was different. Like I had all these plans to do various X, Y, and Z, and then in the span of like a few weeks it was like, okay, that's been canceled, that's been canceled,
Yeah.
that's been canceled, that's been canceled. And it was just it really felt just like kind of like we're like juggling, and everything started falling down, not because you were missing, but because someone was like swatting them above you, be like, oh, oh,
Yeah.
oh.
Oh yeah, no, totally. It happened with me in my line of work where every day something would just fall through the floor and you were just like, what do we do? But I guess you have to persevere. I bet the cool thing about when it comes to the age that we live in now, there's, digital and audiobooks. I'm interested to hear like when it comes to like that version of things, what how is the response to the book through, I know, digital means, and then obviously it trickles into people that want to read it physically. How was that, especially on the first initial release with the digital versions of it?
Oh, good. I've never heard any complaints about it. It's kind of one of those things where I feel like digital readers are so kind of, they would say they're almost like an average day for them. They're like, oh, bought it already, had it at time, it's loaded up in my Kindle. So on one hand, that was kind of nice, where it's that kind of process is just ordinary and seamless. So that was kind of nice. Kind of gave it a little more normality. But I couldn't tell you exactly how things changed because it was my first book and I only saw like I didn't have anything compared to. But I'd be really interested to hear from authors who released a book around the same time but had also released a book beforehand, whether or not they noticed like a jump in digital sales. I think I had more jumps in digital sales than physical. But that's just me kind of guessing by running things by various people.
Yeah, and it's like
But
one of those things where it's like it's like a pay grade above you, and it's like one of those things where it's like It's like an interesting web of just, I guess it would be like a fiefdom of just different, like who gets who in many
It's
ways.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I ask a lot of questions. I'm kind of probably annoying in that way. Like I like asking questions about how various things work, but to a point they're like, we think this is how it is, and you're just kind of like, all right,
Uh,
it's fine if you don't want to tell me, but I'll ask again in another week or two.
yeah, no, totally. Now, one of the things I absolutely love about your book and your world is your magic system. I think it's such a fun, creative way of like a cost per benefit of using memories and magic. And I'm so interested to hear like how did you come up with that and how like when it comes to it, the idea of what is a memory in many ways, I think
Mhm.
reading it and then thinking about like, oh, this is haunting. Like what this is like a really scary magic system. Like how did you decide and come up with kind of those rules? I've been so interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, so kind of the base for it came essentially me trying to be like, what's worse than killing someone? Because I love fantasy books, like everyone, but there always comes a point where you're just like, you can kind of tell which characters are going to die and which ones aren't. So I thought, well, I don't want to like be stuck in that area where like people will be able to tell who's going to die or not. It's something worse. I could do these characters something different. And the memory thing is kind of spurned on by that, being like, well, this is really bad. Like, if I took away someone's memories, would they still be the same person? Would they be different? And from there, the idea grew about, I guess, Michael in general, where I wanted to see like if I had a close first person narration of someone, like would you be able to see the difference in them if you start slowly losing memories? Like what how does that work for someone? Like would you notice the transition? It would be gradual, would it be sharp, would they be control of their emotions? Would they be out of control of their emotions? And it was really fun ideas to play with. And it kind of just kept rolling from there. And it's like there's so many things I can do with it, and there's so many things I keep doing with it. Every time I feel like I go deeper into the magic system and like I get to do all these cool things. And it's really fun for me, like just because it's a system that I can kind of constantly go deeper and deeper and deeper into. And I don't get bored of it. Like
Yeah. Have you done any like research, especially when it comes to memory and how people, when it comes to like, long term and short term, because you kind of do go into the book, but how much research did you go into thinking like, okay, maybe we'll do memory, but then we started learning cool things like, oh, how can I incorporate this into the magic system?
I did a lot of research in the memories, a lot about short term, long term. People, I think, probably have noticed it that like there's times when Michael kind of acts like a dementia patient because his memories just aren't there, and he kind of like misses over things, very obvious things that he should be able to connect the dots to. There's one, I don't think it was a twist, but I think other people call it a twist in the book, where it's very clear Michael's missing something. And the reader, he always spots it before he does. But that's always meant to be a moment of like, why doesn't Michael spot this? Is how messed up is his mind? Um, so yeah, I did a lot of research on how long-term and short-term memory affects people, and putting it in first person really allowed me to kind of fully explore it because it's not just someone explaining how things work. It's you're really seeing it through this one person's eyes, and you kind of have to infer some things like, okay, this he's acting this way, or they're doing this way. Why are they doing this? And then once you get more and more information, you're like, oh, things are really messed up.
Yeah.
Um, so
I'm just interested to hear kind of your approach when it comes to like first person. Like, were there any challenges, especially because you're dealing with memory and just like, do I give? How much do I give? Or do you think people get confused? Was that like a constant struggle, or did you try to find like the right balance of how much a character can have based off of how much memory they have?
yeah, so I made a pretty early decision very early on that I was going to make it so that Michael in particular doesn't explain things. The setup of the book is that he's telling the story to someone who isn't revealed till later, but they're also a citizen of the city. So one of the things like terminology, they never really they Michael doesn't have moments where he's like, and this is what this means, and that's meant to be on purpose because it always one of those weird things that I noticed in fantasy books sometimes where you'd have a character be like, oh, and this is what this means.
Yeah,
And I want to kind of avoid that and play with those tropes a little bit. Be like, okay, they're not going to know everything. Like they're seeing this eyes through someone who's lived it so in the city for a long time. So they're going to be kind of having to figure it out as they go along.
yeah.
Um, so that was a decision I made early on.
Which is an
Um,
interesting decision because if we think about real life, it's not like I walk to the store. Do you know what a store is? And let me tell you about the
no.
currency and how much the price of milk. Like, it's just one of those things. It's like a lot of people shorthand a lot of that stuff, which I really like within your book because you didn't necessarily have a glossary and it's made for a good couple of rereads because then you once you read the story and reread it,
Mhm.
that's how you understand it, which I really like when it comes to a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I like to do. Like you always have like I think the tradition, like the most obvious thing is kind of the Watson Sherlock dynamic, where Sherlock's really smart and he doesn't have to explain anything. But Watson isn't as smart as him, so he explains things to people around him just so they understand what Sherlock's doing. And I didn't. I want to kind of avoid that. I think it's interesting. Like I don't know if I would have. I don't put a glossary in. I put a dramatis persona in the second book and the third one. But I never thought of glossaries until after the book was out. So, but I'm glad that the readers really do get that kind of raw and kind of brutal things where it's like, nope, you got to figure it out. Like this is how the book's going. Like it's not going to be easy, or you're going to be confused. But that's kind of the point in certain aspects of it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful thing that you actually brought up. There's a lot of raw and realistic things. I think for me, one of the most central themes that I've noticed was kind of like what is a legacy and how it can either tarnish or hurt anyone, either one generation or 100 generations from now. Was that something that you initially wanted to explore? Or was this something while you were writing Michael and kind of, his families that it kind of expanded, or is this something you thought of right at the get go?
No, that was actually also one of the early things I decided on. Like, so the main gimmick of Michael was always in my head. All right, what if you're the son of Harry Potter and your grandfather's Merlin and your great grandfather is Dumbledore, or name like 20 different magicians? Like every single person in your family is a famous person, and you're not. Like you just can't match them. And so I really wanted to explain like how much pressure that would be under for someone. Like they know pretty quickly that they're not going to be able to live up to these people that they think they have to because it's important, and they carry all these feelings about it. So that kind of legacies and how it would affect someone was something I really wanted to focus on, just because it was fun. It was fun to write. And Michael in particular, knowing very clearly that he is not going to match these people, gives him a lot of conflicting things, and a lot of that can go back to how I made Michael and like his self confidence, self worth, and stuff. But playing with those ideas of legacy and how it affects people and families and cities and things around you was something I really enjoyed doing. And yeah.
Yeah, and that's like the really cool thing, especially when it comes to your narrative, is it comes into like legacies. It can you don't think about it, it can be a concept, but it can also affect it can influence a lot of people, which jumping into the narrative, you see it from his point of view, you see it from how people interact with him, and it's interesting, especially with it's I guess not really a spoiler, but his dad did something bad, and it's kind of like the sins of the
Yeah.
father get down to the whole family, not just the one son, which I thought is so fascinating when it comes to this book.
Yeah, and that was something that kind of it was one of those things that I read a lot of history when I was like making things up, and I just kind of saw as like there was a lot of like sins of the like father, like oh, who your parents are determine who you're gonna be. And I kept thinking like, well, if I have this prestigious family who has done like 99 generations of good heroic people, what happens if there's one bad apple? Does everyone treats them like a bad, like they're now poisonous? And in some instances they did, yes. And that was one of the things I got to do in the King of Liars, kind of show like the aftermath of what happens if one person breaks the rules, like how it will affect everything in the city, as along with the family.
No, yeah, that's so cool. Now, another thing I loved about your system was kind of in the hollows, the whole royal court system, and how both sinister, convoluted, and absolutely scary it is. And I have to ask you, if you were in the hollows, would you be able to
No,
survive the court system?
no,
No.
it's designed to make people fail. It really is. Like even the people who are more like political savvy, like or even just good natured. Like Kai is a great example. Kai is just a good person. Even he's kind of like, I don't want to be here. Like, so like, no, I don't think I could. I don't think there's a way to win except kind of not playing. But some characters don't want to do that, so they keep thinking they can change things or change things enough to make things better. When in reality,
Yeah.
the yeah.
Did you base the court system off anything? Because you said you're bringing up like history stuff. Did you base it off anything historical, or did you just come up with something that's just pure Scheiterfurt at times?
No, I really just made it like kind of chaotic. Like I don't think you should get to especially the heavier moments like the noble politics. You're like, what is going on? Like what they're like, and which is what Michael does at points where he's like, why is this working this way? And he says like they could be doing this and this, and everyone's kind of like, no, this is how it works. It's just like, okay, like the system got broken for him, and he's doing things in bad ways also. Like he's not any better than some of the nobles. But no, it's really just chaos at its core.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Now, Nick, how do you approach world building in any capacity that's like, okay, today I'm going to write a little piece of the city or maybe a little bit of the world building? How do you normally approach when it comes to any step of world building?
Depends on the aspect. There's certain things like the magic system. Um, that's done. Like it's been done. Like every part of the magic system is done before I started writing it. Because there's a huge element that I had to get nailed down, and I know everything about it. That way, I can do things with like certain characters don't know how things work, but I do. So all the rules are maintained the same, even though as they get more knowledge, you realize, oh wait, things are actually happening consistently. Um, and then there are just aspects of it all like figure it out
Yeah.
while I'm writing. Like I feel like many authors do. Like I'll have moments where I'm like, oh, I got to come up with another noble family, or I got to do like another. I got a name for this thing, and I'll just write. Okay, I'll just do parentheses, insert here, parentheses closed, and then just keep writing,
Oh, you
and
don't
I'll
do
come
what I
back.
do, or like I start looking at things like, chalkboard, son.
I've definitely done that. I can't lie. Like
No, because are names hard? Because I feel like names are hard for everyone. Do you have a system for names, or you're just like, I will figure it out once I get there?
yeah, most of the nobles have a system. Most of them have, it's pretty obvious where they have one long version of their name. So I'll use Leon's name. Leonardo is his full noble name, and then Leon is his like noble nickname, which is only really used with friends or family. So the nobles all follow that. They have one long name, one short name. And then depends. Like King Min is very clearly King's Men, or at least I think it is. Where it's kind of like they were the King's Men, then over time it got shortened to King Men. So some of those are named more like historical, how the city would evolve. There's a lot of noble families that are the same way, where they have names where it's like Harbor or Rider or something that gets a little bit twisted in history, but there's a core to why it is. Um, and then there's other names, like depends on the style of the name. Like if I have like a foreign country, I'll like use more different rules for those. But in Hollow, like they all follow various naming conventions. But I would be lying if there wasn't a time where I looked out my window and said, "Oh, it's a willow tree." Ah, and there comes the willow family.
Oh, I thought you were like, "Hey, here comes the tree family."
No. I would run out of. That's wasting too many names. Got to go in each individual kind of tree. That's the way to do
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love like we find that stuff like that. Is there like a piece of world building that for you you just don't know how to put it into the story? It might just be the most not
it.
insignificant thing. Kind of like I always think about in the Name of the Wind, where it's like a food prep system, or like kind of like the meals. Like, okay, how do you kind of like that, where it's like something that's like it's really cool, but I don't know how to put it into the book.
Oh, there's a bunch of good ones. I'm trying to think of the best one. I think it was the economy was something I never really got to put in. Just because the way it worked, Michael was too poor, especially in the first book, for it ever to fully come out. But there's this huge system of merchants and how they operate and how they like. It's touched on very briefly where the merchants are hiring mercenaries to kind of escort them in. But how the merchant system in the Greater Hollows works, especially with like the North being kind of occupied by rebels, is really fascinating. But it was just something that just couldn't get in. Like there's other things like there's things I touch on in the first book. I'll keep it to the first book, but like there's something called the Waylayers that don't show up till book two that I put in book one because I was like I want to put these things in. I'm gonna get some eventually. I kind of forced my hand. I did a few things like that where I kind of was like I named it. Got to put it in at some point. There's the Narrows where Michael lives, where it's fascinating place where like it's essentially its own little community in the city. Like they're in such a close knit proximity to each other where all the built you can Michael can kind of reach out his window and touch another person's house. And it's something that once again just got cut from the books because I was focusing on different aspects, but they have their own little kind of economy. It's more of a bartering cast than it is like the money system they use in the rest of the city. So things like that, like there's also things like there's ravens. Like I know a bunch of the history of the ravens. Where there's one raven who is called the greatest raven in history, but she only had ever one feather because she died fighting for one of the kings, like two to four generations before Michael was born. And I know her whole backstory and this whole thing about she was from one of the fallen noble families that got like essentially the line ended with her because they can't have kids and stuff. So there's stuff like that where I just know aspects of like these cool stories that happen, but I couldn't get to them.
And that's kind of like one of those things, especially when it comes to a book, is that you have a lot of ideas, but how do you put them all together to make a fluid story? Because I know people are like, I'm gonna put everything in the kitchen sink in, but when it comes to reading, it's like, uh, uh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned this before, but the original draft of King of Liars had three protagonists.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it had three protagonists. It was Michael, Trey, and Chloe. Meant to represent Michael, which was the go-between for all aspects of the city. Trey, which represented the East Side, and then Chloe, who represented the nobles. But for various reasons, especially when I realized no, this is a story about Michael and his memories primarily, I essentially cut their not arcs, but their major focus on. So their arcs are happening in the background. So when they like show up and do things, I've actually written all of what they're doing, but Mike only catches glimpses of it. So there's stuff like that where I would love to have put it in, but my book was already like 150,000 words with just Michael. It could have been as long as a Stormlight book if I had kept the other three characters in.
Oh yeah, or I'd like to call those books wrist snappers because if you hold
Yep.
them, uh, it's one of those things where it's either that or I call them phone book fantasy. But
Door stoppers. Like there was a point where I won't say which book. I definitely used a book as a door stopper at one point because it was so big. I was like, I have to.
oh no, what is it? I've used one for camping because we had to hold something down and I had brought a book with me. You know what? It might have been Oathbringer, so I'm sorry, Brandon, but it was to keep it was for I think the door for a bear like holding thing was kind of like loose a little bit, so I put the book on it and it like held for the entire night and it was just
Look, those books. I love the
versatile.
Storm book. Exactly many uses. Like they're not just reading material. They can be weapons. They can be
Oh,
tools. Like whatever you need
I
them
always
for.
keep them near my bed in case someone comes in and it's like a home intruder. Like they don't know.
If you take one of those to the head, you're not waking back up.
Well, no, they try to shoot me. I think Way of Kings will stop that bullet 4 times over.
It might.
It might, but see, that's kind of the fun thing is, we have a lot of fun when it comes to this. Now, going kind of back to what we were talking about is that what was your favorite character to actually write or interact with Michael? Because I feel like even though Michael's the main focal point, he interacts with so many cool and interesting people. Is there like a character like I can't wait to write about this person or these interactions? What has been your favorite character to write?
My favorite character, and I'll just for the whole series, and I'll do book one. Favorite character, in the whole series is the princess. By far, I love her character. She's one of the most fascinating people I get to write, especially from Michael's point of view. And the whole thing is complicated, very complicated. She's my favorite character. I think my favorite character in book one to probably write is Dark because every time he shows up, he just does the worst thing for Michael possible. And it's just funny to me. Like if Michael can't do anything right in front of him. And it's not even like his fault sometimes, like most of the time it is, but sometimes he's just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's dealing with the wrong person. So Dark's a fun character to write. Trying to think who else in book one is fun to write. The girl in red's fun to write. I can't really go into her obviously that much, but she was very
Yeah.
fun to write for very specific reasons.
I think for me, the hardest one to read was actually Michael's mother. that was one of the hardest ones to read. Would you mind?
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear kind of the research you did for just writing her, because I've had people that have unfortunately have memory problems.
Mhm.
It's like one of those that hits home a little too close. I'm interested to hear kind of that process, if you mind elaborating.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it. Like Michael's mother is very classically with a few things missing and changed, like someone who suffers from memory issues. Like at her very core, like she has moments of very extreme clarity, and then moments where she just instantly loses it. Like I think one of the saddest scenes for me to write um, was when she is talking to Michael, and then she instantly like calls him
Oh
her
yeah.
husband, and like to me that's just like it's Michael looking for help, like desperately asking anyone for help who he doesn't have many people to talk to or trusts or confides in. And he talks to his mother about something, and she gives him advice that he takes to heart, and then it almost in something kind of in like him breaks when like instantly he's like, oh no, hi David, and he's just like, I'm not him. Like, and that's kind of the thing he was talking about, not being his family. Um, so like, but it is something like it definitely is instances of like my own personal experience. So like people have suffered with not those similar things, but mental illness in general, and how it's kind of like you don't want to hold things against them, but like some things hurt, and how it affects people even if the worst times, and then
Yeah.
so.
I think that's one of the beautiful things about your magic system is that you can touch upon these topics, and especially it's kind of for me, I love magic systems where there's like that cost per benefit, where the cost might be greater than the benefit at times, especially when it
Mhm.
comes to, oh, I gotta do a little spell, bye bye grandma's birthday, or think like you
Yeah.
don't even know what you're giving up. And there's characters within the story that they give up more than like, oh, I might forget how to breathe or walk or do
Mhm.
these things, which you don't think about. Like, oh, those are I love that new meme. It's like core memory unlocked.
Yeah.
It's like one of those where I find that so great about your magic system is it's like you're rolling the dice in a game of Russian roulette.
And it's not a good game. Like, and like they're definitely like it's implied that some of the people who are like the strongest in the city don't really use their magic as much because they've realized the cost isn't worth it. So yeah, but it's fun. I actually have a spreadsheet of everything every character uses whenever they use magic,
Ooh.
and I am the only person who will ever have access to it because I if I ever make a mistake, I can be like, it's not a plot hole, it's a plot point, and I just write it
A
into a
wizard did
plot point.
it.
It's the magic system is perfect for turning any plot or plot holes people will see into plot points in the
Oh
future.
yeah,
So
you
it's
just say someone
wonderful.
forgot about it and they're seeing it differently or something.
Exactly. It's wonderful.
Now, actually, that brings up a question because you have like the spreadsheet. Do you
Mhm.
have other type of like wikis, or do you do like things where you have like for continuity? Because I know a lot of authors just have giant binders of like in case I need to remember the name of a horse or something.
Yeah, I have a lot of Word documents and spreadsheets. Most of my stuff's on Word documents. I'm slightly scared of people who have wikis because I'm like, who? How long it must have taken you to build that? Like, and I am an organized-ish person, but like still going through and creating every single wiki, I'd be like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this right now because I go crazy.
Yeah, especially when it
Um,
comes to continuity. Like my biggest fear is like when I write something is what if I get something wrong and it doesn't get edited out right and someone points to me like, oh no.
I see. That's why the memory magic system is perfect. It's not a mistake. It's just
It's
a
there
it's a
for every
plot point.
reason.
Exactly. But no, I keep everything in Word documents. Like, uh, there's one point I had something called the whole world, which was just a massive document. It was hundreds and hundreds of Word pages long. But it got to the point where it was getting hard to open on my computer, so I had to divvy it up into like a bunch of sub segments. But yeah, beyond that, I keep everything kind of organized on my computer in various ways. Like I do a lot of freehand stuff when I'm drafting or kind of world building, or even my phone. It's the amount of notes that are on it, or it's kind of scary. I'll be like, oh, this is something I gotta put in, and then
Oh,
but
yeah, no, I do the exact same thing. I have actually, wow, it's right here. I have a commonplace, like this little commonplace book where it's like in my pocket. So if I ever like wake up or I'm doing something, just scribble something down. And It's like the notes of a serial killer sometimes in there, but it's one of
Dude,
those
I
things.
dude, I get that. Like I had a weird dream, like I want to say like a week ago, or I thought it wasn't a weird dream, but I thought it'd be cool, like plot points and stuff. I wrote it down on my phone, and then I was like trying to decipher it the next day, where I was like, anti-grav, what? Like, what is like? What is this supposed to be? Because it's all misspelled. I just woken up. It's all jumbled. Is this? Was I okay?
Oh yeah,
Did I
no,
write this?
I always think of there's an episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia where they find Charlie's dream journal and it's all nonsense, but it turns out to be like it's just his dreams. It's like denim chicken and they're doing it literally, or they put a chicken in denim shorts. Like, oh no, no, it's something completely different. Except for this one. That one's correct.
Exactly. Like you can't like the notes don't always make sense, but when they do, you're like, got it.
Do you have moments as well, like, going back off like topic a little bit, where it's like you hear something, you hear about something, you're like at Denny's and you hear someone's conversation, like, I love that so much, I'm going to use this for a narrative somehow. Have you ever had those moments where you've borrowed weird things you
I
found out?
I don't think I've done it in conversations. Like I've done information where it's like weird information I've heard someone say. I definitely think there's sometimes like really cool phrases are said. And then they're just like not given the screen time they deserve. And I'm like, I'm using that. I'm stealing it.
Is
Like
there
someone will
is,
say,
is there one you could give? Oh, sorry, I didn't
uh
want me to put you on the spot.
no, I'm just trying to remember. Like the King of Liars, I definitely probably did at one point. Oh, I used the word, I can't actually say it because it's a spoiler. There's a character who says who's I can't even hint
Oh,
at it.
no,
It's
you're good.
but there's one I've been using for uh I I I can't even mention that. I'm sorry. Like they're all
Oh.
about spoiler stuff. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good. I can cut this out if
No, you're good. You can keep it in. Like I'm like, oops, sorry. Like it's all if I steal a phrase or use a phrase, it's
it's
usually hard
redacted.
words. Yeah, I'm like it's redacted. I'm like you'll know what they are. But I just can't say them out loud.
No, no, you're good. Yeah, no, it's like one of those things where you pull things from real life, and I mean that's a great thing about when it comes to writing creatively is that everything's an idea, and like how do I make this? Do you ever have those moments where like you can't stop being creative, or just like every second of my life, like, oh, that's a good idea. I'm gonna write a whole short story right now. I'm like, why? Because I can.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Like I am someone who I feel weird if I don't write every day. And so I even if it's just like a little bit, I write every day. And that's like sometimes not good, but also like good at the same time. So I definitely get the issue of like you're always creative and like you see things where it's like, oh, that'd be cool, that'd be fun, or like, how would I do that differently? It's one of those fun things about being a creative person. You can see kind of the world a little bit differently sometimes.
And I think it goes back into, writing, and I think when it comes to your series, it does such a good job because is it a trilogy or I believe, or is it a quadrilogy? I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm so sorry.
I have every intention of making it a 5 book series. We
Oh,
will
five
just
book
see if
series.
we will see if that happens. But I wrote it as I've planned it as a 5 book series. I have pitched it as a 5 book series. So it is until it's not a 5 book series.
See, and that's the fun thing about writing books. Sometimes you keep going. It's like Robert Jordan. I'm going to write it as third. I'm going to keep going.
Yes, I don't disagree. I will say I've always planned it as 5 books. So unless something changes, it's gonna hopefully be 5 books.
And that is super rad.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nick, for coming on and talking to my listeners, as well as just having a super fun chat about being super creative. What is the future like for you, especially within, you know, I keep forgetting it's 2021. I'm like, how's
Yeah.
2022 coming? Like between those, what's coming up on the
Um,
horizon for books?
so I will have book 3 coming out in 2022, in November. It's getting a little bit delayed than what I said on Twitter, so my bad. But it's for various reasons. So it's coming out November 2022. And then after that, I'm working on something that's not Michael related because I need a little bit of a break from Michael. I'll be real.
It's not him. It's not you.
It's
It's him.
yeah, it's not me, it's him. So I'm working on that.
Is
It's
that
going
also in the
well.
same universe?
No,
Okay.
this is different. I think especially with all the stuff about COVID, I need kind of a break from the universe. I thought I was gonna be one of those writers like, no, I'll never leave the universe. Like I always wanted King Lars universe to be rich and expansive, can go all these different countries. But something about COVID, where we were all kind of trapped in places where I'm like, no, I need to do something a little bit different to just kind of get my creative juices
Oh,
going
yeah.
back to normal.
I 100% agree with you because I'm so like for me I'm tired of like oh maybe I don't want to watch a zombie movie anymore or a movie where people are trapped in a house or like
Yeah.
infection movies like I've got more like I just want to watch Bob's Burgers and chill out or do something that isn't necessarily a drama at this point.
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of people are dealing with where dramas are like heavy stuff is kind of a little bit hard to read. I know I was in that position at one point too, where I was just like, now I'm with you. I'm like, maybe I just want to watch Bob's Burgers right now. Like I don't want to watch I don't even know if this is a real show like Empire where every character dies. It's a knockoff of Game of Thrones, but like that kind of stuff, at least
Yeah.
right now.
Well, yeah, especially like for me, it's like I remember right when the pandemic started, I was like, teehee, I'll read The Stand and watch Contagion. And now I'm like, am I an idiot?
I did the same thing.
What you do?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
did the
we're.
exact same thing.
I love that. It's like let's have a themed pandemic party, and now it's like, why?
I think it's just like, oh yeah, it won't be that bad. And so you kind of like, I'll do it. I will say I also like plague stories. Like I had always wanted to write a plague story. I'll just flat out say I can't write a plague story for at least 10 years. So that's
Yeah,
not happening anytime soon.
yeah. That was like with me, and was rereading the Lies of Locke Lamore, and I forgot like the majority of it has to do with the plague. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, there's like a lot of them in places. And now you read the word plague or virus or something, you're like, yeah, okay. This hits a little bit differently now.
yeah. And I mean that's kind of the thing, but unfortunately, we have to, push through and
Yeah.
just find what makes us happy. Because for me, my expression has always been enjoy the little moments in life,
Mm.
especially now, where every little moment you look at is being precious. Like I went to the park a day ago, and I was like, remember when this used to be illegal?
That's a great outlook. That's a great outlook because I do. I remember when it was.
Or it's like when you're like 90 years old, Grandpa, why are you always outside? Back in my day, it used to be bad to be outside.
Back in my day, you could get arrested if you went outside without a dog or on a run. Like things were different.
Oh yeah. Um, I guess where can they find you on social media, Nick?
Yeah. So on social media, I'm at Mac Martell on Twitter, on Instagram at Nick Martell Official. And you can also go to my website at nickmartell.com. I have contact forms that you can just casually send me emails. So
And
anywhere you, sorry, what?
and where can they find your book?
Oh, pretty much anywhere books are sold, like Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Hopefully indie bookstores. I like a lot of them like me, so hopefully they have in stock. So pretty much anywhere. And if not, you can always order them. So it's great.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for stopping by. I really appreciate it so much. It was a pleasure. Do you have anything you want to say to everyone? Any last minute words before we
No, thanks for
sign
having
off?
me. It was a great time.
Well, everyone, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you liked it, maybe consider subscribing down below. I would really appreciate that. Well, everyone, thank you all. And like always, may your food and drink ever be tasteful, and may your books be filled with fantasy and adventure. Bye, everyone. See ya.